Hello, happy Tuesday. It's time for another installment of a successful transition from monogamy to open. And like I talked about last Friday, this week we're going to talk about the big four negative emotions, which are fear, shame, guilt, and embarrassment, and how they affect our ability to be successful, especially when we're making changes to something that's often against the grain of societal expectations. So today we're going to talk about shame. And shame is an extremely strong negative emotion. Many people often confuse shame and guilt because they think of them both as being involved with having done bad things. But shame is well beyond feeling that you've done something bad. Shame is more that belief that you are a person, are essentially bad or flawed, and it directly affects your feeling of self-worth, and whether or not you're worthwhile as a person. So shame is incredibly damaging. And this is something we're not born with. I mean, if you think of little kids when they're 2, 3 years old, they will happily run around naked. They have no shame about it. They have no reason to feel ashamed because no one has taught them that they're supposed to. Little kids will easily masturbate in front of anyone just because they're touching a part of their body that feels good, and they have no reason to think any differently of it or that there's anything wrong with it. And not that there is anything wrong with it, it's just sometimes you might want to get them to do that in their own room and not in the living room in front of grandma. But shame is a very debilitating negative emotion because it affects people in very strong ways, and people have huge amounts of shame. Even people who are not part of any of the alternative sexuality communities, just people in general have enormous amounts of shame. And the problem with shame is that it increases rates of suicidality for people, higher rates of drug and alcohol abuse, and other destructive behaviors, cutting behaviors, things like that. And aside from the mental health factors, there's also the physiological factors. People with huge amounts of shame have higher rates of cardiac issues, immune suppression issues. There's a lot of physiological issues that can happen in our bodies because of deep amounts of shame. So shame is a very important thing to focus on and work on within ourselves. And it's not just people within the alternative communities. I mean, it has a huge effect on sexuality overall, and very strong amounts of shame when it comes to people's sexuality. People are very ashamed of the things they like, of the things they think they're supposed to like, how many partners they've had, how many partners they think they should have had. I have worked with people, even people who by most standards would be considered very vanilla. I remember a couple who came in and were having difficulty with sexual desire and the amount of sex they're having after many years in a monogamous marriage. And they were pretty vanilla. They were just wanting to try and figure out how to have a better sex life. And after a number of sessions, the husband finally said, well, I'm just going to tell her because you won't bring it up. And the wife was very upset that he was going to tell me this thing. And he finally told me that she would no longer allow them to engage in anal sex, despite the fact that she enjoyed it. She had her strongest orgasms from it, but she had so much shame about it that she was convinced that if she was doing this horrible, disgusting thing, that she was going straight to hell and that she was a terrible person and everyone was going to know about it. And there was no talking to her about it. It was awful, it was bad, it was disgusting, and it doesn't matter that I like it. We can't do this. We can't even talk about it. Like, there was no discussing it. It was just off the table. So if you can imagine, for somebody who's otherwise very much within the societal norms, has that much shame about something that most people would consider a pretty typical, ordinary type of sexual behavior, imagine how difficult it can be when you're dealing with people who have alternative things, such as open relationships, such as BDSM, kinks, fetishes. the amount of shame can be huge. So that's all we're going to talk about today with shame. Tomorrow we're going to talk about guilt. On Thursday we're going to talk about embarrassment. And then on Friday we're going to wrap this up on a little bit more about how to deal with these emotions and how to keep them from overwhelming us because they very easily can if we're not careful. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow when we talk about guilt. If you haven't already, feel free to join the private Facebook group, A Successful Transition from Monogamy to Open. There's some great discussions going on and articles being posted, and it's really growing a lot. And so I think this will be a great resource for people who are interested in this, and I hope you will join if you're interested. Thanks so much, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.